For today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a brushed metal button using Photoshop. Now, the way we're going to do this is we're going to start out with a blank project and add a base button layer and add a metal look to it, and then turn it into a brushed metal look, and then finish it off by adding an icon to it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create the base layer of the button, add a metallic look to it, and then add a brushed metal look on top of that metallic look, and then finish it off with an icon, in this case a gear that's inset into the button. Okay, so let's start out with our project, and I'm going to select a new project here, 1000 by 1000 pixels. I'll create that. I'm going to change my base layer color of the project to 50% gray, and I'm just going to hit edit fill and then just fill it with 50% gray, and then we'll start creating the button. I'm going to create the button using a rounded rectangle tool. So I'm going to go to my toolbar, select rounded rectangle, and then I'm going to create a square button inside of our blank project. To restrict the button to a square, when you create the button, just make sure you're holding down on the shift key. When you hit the shift key and drag, you will get a perfect square. So in this case, I just did that. I'm just going to center this base button here on the project, and then we can start beginning by creating the metallic look. The metallic look is created by using the gradient tool. So I'm going to come over to the layers panel. I'm going to double click on the layer I just created, the rounded rectangle layer, to bring up the layer style options. And in the layer style options, I'm going to select gradient overlay. Okay, so it's defaulting to whatever I use last, which happens to be the gradient that goes from black to white, which is exactly what we want to use right now. So, and it's defaulting to linear style. So basically what that means, it's going to start out one color, in this case white at the top, and it's going to fade to black at the bottom, and that's because my angle is set to 90, so it's just going to come straight down. The layer styles that you have available to you, there are 5 of them. This one is linear. There's also a radial, which is more of a circular style. There's also a diamond style, a reflective style, which kind of comes out of the center and goes and fades to each side. But what we're going to use is we're going to use the angle style. So here's what angle style looks like with this black to white gradient that we have. So think of this as sort of like a clock face. And we're starting out with black, and as we go around, it'll eventually come back to white. So we go from black, starts fading into a dark gray, then to a medium gray, then to just a standard gray, and then it starts going into the white. So it's kind of like a clock face. What we want to do is we want to add more facets to this to give it more of a metallic look. So how do we do that? We actually have the ability to edit the gradient. So if I click the gradient, you'll see that it starts out from black and fades into white. So what we're going to do is we're going to add more of these little handles along the way to create more facets. Okay, so let me show you how that works. So I'm just going to come right in the center of the gradient and click, and give myself another handle. And in this case, it just defaulted to white. So now let's see what the effect had on the actual gradient as it's applying to our base button. So we're going from black to white, and then we're staying white to white. So let's see how that works. We went from black, as we come around halfway, we stay white, and then the remainder is just white to white, so it just stays white. So let's change the color just to see what the effect would be. So I'm going to go from black to white, and now white back to black again. So I'm going to click on the handle, change the color back to black, and let's see how that affected what we're looking at as far as the gradient goes. So we started out black, we came around, we faded into white, and then, as we can see, that's where we are right now, halfway. Now we're going to go white back to black again. So now you see how that works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add several more of these facets, and hopefully at the end it'll look more like a metallic gradient. So let's do this again. I'm going to come in the center of these two gradient points, and then I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to go in between, and I'm just going to add more of these handles. Now right now they're defaulting to black. What we really want to do is have it go from black to white to black to white, black to white, etc. So I'm just going to go to every other one and change the color to the opposite of what the one to the left is. So here we are, black, white, black. Now we're going to make this one white, and so on. So let me just quickly move through, and we're black, white, black, white, black. This will be white. And if you notice, what's happening in the actual gradient is it's starting to get this pinwheel effect, and that's exactly what we're looking for right now. So let me finish it off with the last one, and here we go. So what's happening is we're going black to white, then black to white, black to white, black to white, and then back to black again. So it may not look like metal right now, and that's because the colors are kind of harsh. So I'm just going to click OK on this, and then just adjust my opacity. So what I'm going to do is just take the opacity slider and start taking some of the opacity away. And as I'm doing that, it's making the darker colors less harsh and giving it a more reflective quality. And as you can see, as I move it down, it's starting to look more like metal. So I'm going to leave the gradient as it is right now and give it more of a 3D look, so it looks like a button coming off the page. And I'm going to use the bevel and emboss layer style to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a style using some of these options here. So I'm going to just use an inner bevel. I'll keep it smooth. We'll make this pretty simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a little bit more size. And if you notice, the edges here are starting to come off the page. So we'll keep it simple just to make it look like a button, like a 3D button. It may be a little tough to see. So what I'll do is I'll just add a little drop shadow, so you can get a better idea of what the button looks like. And I'll just kind of zoom out a little so you can see that it's really starting to look like a button, and it's kind of popping off the page. So far so good, but what we want to do now is we want to add a brushed metal look to this. And so how do we do that? I'm going to add another layer, and I'll create a layer from the layers panel, and I'm going to also add a 50% gray background. Actually, maybe I'll just make it a little bit of a lighter gray. So I'll do that. I'll make it a lighter gray, and I'll fill that, and it's filling the entire project right now, and we're going to make that adjustment in a little bit. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to add two filters to this, and these two filters will give it that brushed metal look. And the filters we're going to use, one is going to be noise, and the other one is going to be a blur. So let's start out with the noise, and I'll go up to the filters drop down, and I will go to noise, and I'll hit add noise. Now this is to taste, and it just takes a little practice to find out what you want to use as far as noise goes with your particular look. Again, it's to taste. In my case here, I'm using a subtle bit of noise. If you wanted to, you can add a lot of noise, and you can see that the contrast kind of increases. But I'm going to keep it low, and we'll go from there. So I'm picking a lower percentage. Make sure you select Gaussian, and monochromatic is turned on. So I'll hit OK. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the filter drop down, and then go to blur, and select radial blur. Now radial blur is more like a circular kind of a pattern. And again, this is to taste. I'm going with the default here of 10. You can always change it in your own particular project. My blur method is spin, and as you can see, it's kind of spinning around in a circular pattern. And the quality, I'm just going to select best. So let me hit OK and see what happens. So what happened was it actually took the noise that we had in from the previous filter, and it blurred it in a radial or a circular pattern. And I'll just zoom in to show you. It's kind of like a vortex in here. Okay, so that's what the two blurs have done. The problem we have here is that we can't see what's underneath it, and the reason why is that when you create a layer, it defaults to normal, and normal is more of a solid kind of a layer, so you can't really see through it. So you're going to have to change the blending mode. In this case, I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay. You can use whatever you want, but overlay seems to work well in this case. So I'm just going to go into my blending options, and there are, I believe, 27 blending options. I'm going to select overlay. Once I hit overlay, you'll see that that circular noise blur pattern was applied to whatever was beneath the layer. And in this case, it just applied it to the top of the metallic button that we were creating. So I'm going to zoom in just to show you what actually happened here. So we applied this circular blur pattern to give it the brushed look on top of the metallic look. So let me just hide temporarily that brushed look. And this is what we originally created, and it looks fine. But if we wanted to give it, like I said, the brushed look, this will take care of it. So here we have that brush applied. The only thing that we want to do here to kind of make it look like more of a realistic button is, if you notice, the brushed look is applied to the base layer, and we really only want it applied to the button. And we'll go to the rounded rectangle layer, and in this case I'm going to hold the control key down and click on the thumbnail, and if you notice, it just made a selection around the button. And then with that selection current, I'm going back to the layer that we made the filter adjustment to, and I'm just going to add a layer mask. And once I add the layer mask, it restricts the fill only to the area of the button, and it's no longer present in the background. The last thing I want to do is add an icon to the button, and I have already selected an icon. It's a gear icon that I'm going to put in here. So I'm just going to paste that icon in here. And here's the icon. And if you notice that there are some areas of white are surrounding the gear, so we're just going to do some quick editing to this to get rid of that, just to isolate the actual gear. So I'm going to select, in this case, my magic wand tool, and I'm going to select the white areas and just select each area and hit delete, just to isolate the gear. All right, I'll hit select, deselect. Then I'm going to go into the layer style options for the gear layer, and I'm going to add a color overlay to it. I had previously selected overlay as my blend mode, so I'm just going to move it back to normal. And I just happen to have a gray, a medium light gray selected, and I'm in normal mode. So now you can actually see the brushed metal pattern within the gear. I'm just going to lower the opacity just a little so we can actually see it a little bit better. So we have a color selected, and now I'm going to just use a bevel and emboss to kind of embed it into the actual button. In this case, it's defaulting. I just happen to have it defaulting up. And that's not a bad look, but I want to make the gear look like it's inset or scraped into the button. So I'm just simply going to come over and change the direction from up to down. And you can see now it looks like it's actually inset into the button. You could change the size if you'd like to taste. So I'm just going to hit OK and back away just to show you what it looks like at this point. So you can see it's inset. Looks pretty good. But the last thing we will do to this is we're going to add an overlay of the gradient inside the actual gear. So let's go back into the layer style panel. And before we apply, what we're going to do here is we're going to apply a gradient. I'm going to go back into my color overlay option and just lower the opacity a bit on the color overlay level. And then I'm going to add a gradient overlay. So basically what I'm going to do is add the same gradient that we used out here on the actual button. We're going to use it on the inside of the gear, and that'll give us a more realistic look. And as you see, as I added that in, and I'll just shut it off just to show you, it kind of gave it that nice shading on the inside. And we could play around with the opacities on that to taste and just give it a little bit more of a realistic look. So this looks pretty good. I'm just going to zoom out so you can see what it looks like as if it was a real button. And you can see that, you know, we have the metallic look on the outside with the brushed metal, and on the inside we're still maintaining that brushed metal look. I made it a little bit darker so it'll stand out, and then we added that as a final touch. We added the gradient on the inside. Now this button looks fine as it is, but just remember, you can always play around with other options. For instance, if you didn't want to have a gray background, even though this looks kind of good, you can actually just go in and play around with the colors. In this case, let's just go in and change the gray of the gear color, and we'll just pick something else like a red. And you can see it just gives it a different look. And again, to taste, if you want to make it stand out, make it blue, purple, green, it's up to you. So you always have a lot more options. Plus you do have other layer styles. You can add a pattern, you could add inner glows, and whatever you like to taste. I'm just going to cancel this now and go back out to the upper layer, which is our brushed aluminum layer, and you can do the same thing. You can go in and you can change the color if you wanted. And let's in this case just go in and add let's say a bluish color to it, and you can see as you move it around in the color panel, you can get different looks. And again, it's up to you. It's to your taste. Okay, so I'll just cancel it now and go back to what we originally had constructed. So right now, I say we're done with the project. Looks pretty good. If you have any questions, leave them below. And hopefully I'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.